So, welcome back to Everything Marketplaces, where we talk with founders and leaders from some of today's top marketplaces. So, this is episode 106, which was a really great group chat that we just had with JT Garwood, who's the co founder and CEO of Bttn. So, Bttn is a B2B marketplace for medical supplies that's reinventing healthcare distribution. They're an early stage but fast growing marketplace and recently announced a $20 million Series A round that was led by Tiger Global. So this is a really great chat with JT where we got to learn more about the founding story of Bttn, did a deep dive into it as a B2B marketplace for medical supplies, got to learn more about the recent growth, fundraising journey, and also had a really great Q&A. So really enjoyed this conversation. Now you're going to find it a great watch to the end. So JT, welcome to the group chat. I've been really interested to learn more about Bttn as a B2B marketplace since I believe I first came across it after your recent fundraising announcement. So I'm really excited to have you join us and dive into things, here today with you. Before we do, though, I think it might be great if you can start off by sharing a little bit more on your background, though, for those that don't know you.
Absolutely. And thanks for having me. I've been excited about joining this. I'm a huge fan of Everything Marketplaces. I'm constantly sharing all the content with my team and love the group chats and love who you have on and the community that you have. I'm active in the comment boards. So please answer my questions if anybody knows the answers. And as background on me, started my career at Microsoft. Was living out in Washington, D.C., sort of just got the urge always to leave and knew that I was probably going to go the entrepreneur route at some point, just depending on what it was I was doing. Ended up leaving right as the pandemic began, and actually had started a blockchain enabled marketplace with two other blockchain engineers. And we didn't really know the category that we were going to focus on, but the point of the marketplace was to have more secure transactions via Hyperledger Fabric. And ended up right with the pandemic timing, we realized that all these healthcare providers were being defrauded. Right. And I'm not sure if everybody here remembers what was going on at the start of the pandemic, but you could just go on any news outlet early in the morning and see that someone had sent a payment to somewhere overseas and, the goods didn't show up, or maybe those supplies were fake, or they were being price gouged. And we saw a really great opportunity to use the tech that we were building right in a high impact community immediately. So we decided to build a B2B marketplace, a blockchain enabled marketplace focused on sourcing international manufacturers for PPE and medical supplies directly with hospitals and health systems here in the US. And that just had a crazy fast start. We had bootstrapped that company. And within 6 months, we had done probably 25 million in GMV. And so that's where I really got familiar with the healthcare system. But we were solely focused on hospitals and health systems. And so those are the big, exactly what you're thinking of in your local community. You're down in Santa Monica, the UCLA meds of the world and everything else down there. But during that process, I got to understand really the underbelly of medical supply and healthcare distribution. And what I realized was that it was a system that wasn't built for any particular reason to serve the community that it was. And there was very little technology baked into it. And that comes as no surprise. I think that everyone outside of the healthcare system in the US knows that it's antiquated and it lacks tech, but the folks inside the health systems know that as well. And so the more and more I talked to doctors across the US, the more that I realized was that they really didn't have any, Amazon for medical supplies or anything of the sort. And so we ended up selling that company in January of 2021. And my co-founder and I left, and we're actually down in San Diego, and we're discussing what we wanted to do next, and had realized that there was a huge opportunity to just build the go-to website for the name brand world-class medical supplies, but not focused on the hospital setting, but focused on what they call the alternate site community, which is, the dentists, the physicians, the chiropractors, the dermatologists, everyone that's not a hospital, the physician offices, you name it, family offices, assisted living, hospice. And those folks were getting even worse experience from their medical distributors than the large hospitals were. And basically with that, we kind of knew that we loved B2B marketplaces. We wanted to build a managed marketplace. Our previous marketplace was unmanaged and it was brutal to deal with in terms of medical supply. And with just that little intuition, we launched Bttn and have been on a bit of a tear ever since.
Yeah, that's a really interesting, background. I actually didn't know about that. So thanks for sharing with us.
Yeah.
So you did mention some kind of initial learnings that you then taken with you to Bttn. So maybe to expand on those a little bit more, what were some of those?
Yeah. So there's two sides. Obviously, like what we have to always think about at Bttn is we're combining healthcare and more specifically healthcare distribution with classic marketplace dynamics. And it's a hard bridge to learn. And so starting on the healthcare distribution side, the number one thing that we learned was that these folks did not have a place to go on the internet today to buy these critical supplies. So the way it would work is that they would take a manufacturer name, let's take 3M, right? For example, lots of doctors use 3M. They'd type into the internet looking for that product. And what would pop up is either the 3M website, right? Which they can't buy directly from. It would redirect them through a sales channel to a regional distributor. And then they would once they got in contact with them, they'd have to get on the phone with the sales rep, or they would be directed towards like an Amazon, right? Or a CVS, some online retailer, which wasn't B2B pricing. So they were overpaying and they were paying full retail for these goods that they should be getting B2B discounting on. And so we had to initially realize from the healthcare perspective that docs were looking for this solution, but there wasn't something out there today. And what was a huge priority was finding those name brands that they needed. The second thing that we learned was that the current way that medical distribution was set up was just ridiculously complicated. When you sign up for one of these major distributors, and for those that don't know, this is the McKesson's of the world, this is the Medlines of the world, this is Owens and Minor, a few more, and there's a lot of regional distributors on top of that. If you wanted to sign up with one of those companies, you get on the phone with the sales rep, they run a credit check, they run a background check, they implement minimum order quantities, right? They then say you have to buy, this much minimum for us for 3 months as we build the inventories back into your local region. And then after that, you'll be aligned to a sales rep who will take care of it. Sure, you have an online ordering portal, but the pricing is fully controlled by the sales rep, right? Which means that a dentist could be paying a vastly different price for the same exact product as the dentist down the street from them if they weren't able to negotiate a little bit better. And so with all of that, we said that's disruption at its core. Like, that's just the primest examples of we can make impact on this industry. And then from the marketplace side, it was really learning, because we definitely bridge between B2B and B2C as I think most B2B marketplaces do. But we were constantly learning, what it was. And the first thing was that we took from our first marketplace was, like I mentioned, we were unmanaged, and medical supplies are a trust buying experience. You have to have a high degree of trust in the product that you're buying. You have to have a high degree of trust in who you're buying from. And so with Bttn, we from the start said, when folks purchase from Bttn, they will immediately perceive that they're buying from our brand. Doesn't matter if we're using distribution centers on the back end that Bttn doesn't fully control. We will still use the drop shipping capabilities of our vendors, but what we need to make sure is that folks are comfortable with us and our brand name. And so learning that the hard way, right? And learning that, quality control of medical supplies was a very important topic for us to focus on, was some of the hacks that from the start we knew about, instead of stumbling our way. But in our first company, it was, plenty of returns, like a ridiculous amount of returns, until we figured out how to do quality control down through the distribution layer.
Yeah, those are a lot of great learnings and also topics that we're going to jump into here. So you did mention like the big challenge, right? And the opportunity for disruption. But it sounds like a very hard industry to break into. So like, what were the first steps to actually starting Bttn as a marketplace that you took? And could you maybe like walk us through the initial kind of early stages?
Yeah. So when we launched Bttn, we only had, I think, 57 products that we could sell. And the way that we did that was that we reached out to regional distributors, and I'm talking, Google right now, like medical supplies by near me. And we would call those people and ask them, hey, do you have any extra supplies that be willing for us to sell through the internet? And they'd say, sure, we have some surplus inventory that we'd be willing if you can sell it at this price. And we go, great, sounds good. And what we do is we wouldn't mark up that price, right? We'd buy it at a discount and add simple markup to it and resell it. And what we were finding was that even on those small selection of products, we were 20 to 40% less expensive than what they were paying today for those medical supplies. And that was groundbreaking, right? To have that realization, like, wow, we have no economies of scale. We have nothing cool going on. We don't have the right products, but still we're saving people money even on these small selection of products. And so as we scaled, we just had to keep selling only those 57 products, and the majority of which weren't done through e-commerce. We had a 3-person, me being one of them, sales force that was calling doctors across Washington state, because we're based here in Seattle, and basically saying, hey, I can save you money on medical supplies. Let me tell you a little bit about Bttn. And we did direct sales pretty much for the first month, almost exclusively, just to get that flywheel going. And it was mostly because our customers weren't comfortable with technology. These are, later generation, not familiar with tech, have a bad perception of e-commerce and other materials. They've been convinced that by the industry that it would never work in their environment. And only when we showed them, hey, you still have someone to call if you can't figure it out, but we'd prefer, and you'd prefer, to not call me every time you need one of these 57 products. Then they started going to the website. Then we started seeing the repeat purchases come through the platform, and then we were able to scale accordingly. But getting it off the ground was just, please buy one of these 57 materials. And then, now our catalog is 2.5 million different SKUs as we've aggregated demand and found more supply. But it was a slug to get to this point to start.
Yeah, I can certainly imagine. That's a pretty good story. So I guess for some context, you did mention 2.5 million SKUs. So, what sense of scale are you at today?
Yeah, so I think we just passed 9,000 customers across the US, selling to all 50 states, primarily focused on those alternate site providers like physicians and dentists and dermatologists, and surgery centers are a huge subsegment for us. Our growth is, pretty fantastic. I think, we grew almost 80% month over month from June to July. And, we're selling on average, we just had our highest product variation. I think it was over like 3,000 SKUs sold just on the website alone. Our team's up to 80 employees. And we, as you mentioned in the beginning, most recently closed our Series A financing from Tiger Global for an additional $20 million. So we're growing fast and trying to be the go-to healthcare supplier for every single medical practice in the US.
Certainly sounds like it. And congrats on all the recent growth, by the way. So I guess, I didn't realize we actually didn't cover, like a high level overview of Bttn. So could we maybe, could you walk us through like what Bttn is, and maybe go in a little bit more detail on it as a B2B marketplace?
My favorite topic. Yeah, so what Bttn's trying to build is the future of healthcare distribution. And what that means to us is we're essentially building the hybrid model. So today you can think about the incumbents as classical distribution centers with logistics, heavy inventories, sales forces, no low tech. And then we have pure e-commerce on this side, right? And there's been attempts in the past by folks trying to start this business that have tried to do just the e-commerce front, right? And what they've missed is that people care a lot about the quality of supplies and delivery and what we call service excellence. And so the reason that we call ourselves a hybrid model is because what we've built is a solution that says you can still have that best in class service excellence experience when it comes to the delivery timeframes, getting the right supplies when you need it. But you can also have this fantastic, wonderful, delightful e-commerce experience that makes it easy and adds a whole lot of technology and automation to your day-to-day buying process. Because of that, we're able to offer every single healthcare provider upwards of 20 to 40% on their entire medical supply catalog. The baseline reason for that is because, one, our cost structure is dramatically lower than those distributors that I mentioned today. We don't have distribution centers. We don't carry inventory. We don't have massive field sales forces. And because of that, our SG&A expense is typically like, theirs is close to 20, ours is closer to 3%. And that 17% just right there, we pass directly to our customers. Outside of that, the other thing is that we also don't let our sales reps mark the price of the products when sold to the customer. And so that also puts us at a huge price advantage because we standardize that margin, and it's plenty of take for us, but it's also dramatically less than the incumbents need today to make their business model sustainable. So if you look at it from the long tail, those two cost advantages versus the incumbents are really what make us the go-to, cost leader from now and into the future. And we do identify as a B2B marketplace. I think that, our customers don't know what that means. So you won't see a whole lot of marketing on that on the Bttn website or anywhere about Bttn. Our customers aren't very heavy tech users. And so what we're doing all the time is not talking about disruption, not talking about how we're going to make, their lives dramatically better. We're just talking about how there's a little bit better option and how we can gradually move them up the chain. And I think that's the high level.
That's really great, Nat. Thanks for walking us through it. You definitely brought up a really good point, which is about, on the customer facing that, they don't use the words B2B marketplace and, disruption and whatnot. So do you find it kind of challenging? And we see it in the community a lot of times at B2B marketplaces specifically, where maybe they're building in an industry that hasn't seen that much innovation. And, they are providing this kind of new solution and this disruption. So have you found that challenging?
I have. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. There's so much confusion in our space. And I love talking about it in the context of the Don Valentine confusion phase, right? And I just am obsessed with that line. If you don't know what it is, go look it up. It's a beautiful sentence about, industries that Sequoia used to invest in. And I think that healthcare and health tech is just at the prime center of the confusion phase at the moment. The incumbents don't know what's going to happen next. The customers don't know what's going to happen next. The investors don't know what's going to happen next. And what Bttn is smack dab in the middle is we're trying to convince all that people at once that our future is the best future. And there's no one really that we can point our finger at and say we want to be like that. We have to look to another industry. We love B2B marketplaces. So I'm usually using examples like Farmers Business Network, right? In farming, classic B2B, one of the original B2B marketplaces. And then, obviously Fair, just these broad examples for the organization on what we model ourselves off of. And, I think what started as a point of confusion has actually turned into one of our greatest advantages, because it was only until we had some scale that no one took us seriously. These folks have been justifying for years. I was in a meeting with the distributor, and they had McKinsey or like one of these large organizations build a 30-page report on why Amazon would never disrupt their business model. That's how much they're justifying that tech will never enter their industry. They're paying people to write opinions on it, right? And it's clear to see that there's an obvious angle, right? Like everything's being digitized, everything's moving to the internet. Why shouldn't medical supplies as well? But they will tell you to the ends of time. And so, we got laughed out of a good amount of rooms to start. But when you have 9,000 customers wanting to buy from you, it's very easy then to go get suppliers to say, hey, wouldn't you like to have another sales channel and come through us as well? And so what was, I think, a challenge for us has now became a huge upside, because folks are realizing, it just takes a little bit longer to get them to come through. And now our two most powerful demand levers are word of mouth and search, because doctors love it. Doctors love it. There's a safe spot on the internet to buy these supplies. And they've never had that before. So we're definitely market leaders at the moment. And it's funny to say that because we're only a year and a half in, but that's the intention, is to keep that leadership position.
Yeah, certainly sounds like now's the right time. So and you're definitely capitalizing on that.
Trying.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned as far as being that kind of like a resource or kind of portal for doctors to to search and go to. What are some ways, maybe through the product or kind of like going deeper in the value chain and kind of value add that you're I would say productizing?
Yeah, well, the first and foremost for us is indexing of these SKUs, because it's never been done before. It's not like pretty much every other category where there is another spot to buy it and you're trying to build the specific subset and build tools and functionality to increase it. Like these manufacturers have not done the indexing and SEO work around these products. And so when you search certain products, the name brand of it, Bttn, actually pops up first on paid and organic for that product, because those companies haven't done that work. So it's becoming a big moat for us. It reminds me a lot of, IMDb in the early days, right? Or Amazon in the early days, and just how they put in that work to index everything. And because of it now, like how much that's ballooned because they pop up first versus everybody else. And so when a doctor searches for a SKU, they're not finding anything. And so what we're doing is putting like a tremendous, and it's expensive and doesn't lead to any short-term growth gains. It's all, you have to think about it on a longer term perspective, which is frustrating, as an early stage marketplace, but it's worth it, right? It's worth it because doctors then, when they search for something, Bttn pops up, they come to our website. And so just getting the SKUs on the platform is such a huge priority for us in terms of the product, because it's not, if doctors search for something on Bttn and it's not there, they put us into a category of, they're just a specialty distributor, right? They don't have all the products like they claim they do. They only have some of the products. In reality, we have 2.5 million SKUs. We only have about 15,000 live on the platform because it takes so long to get those SKUs up. We're figuring out ways every day to hack that with the help of the Everything Marketplace community. And we're really fighting through that. And then outside of the SKU upload, I think the second one is payment and checkout. It's a huge struggle today for these businesses. You can think of them like SMBs that are each spending probably between 10 and 25,000 a year on their medical supplies. And a lot of them are making probably 90% of those purchases on a credit card. And they'd prefer not to. Right? They'd prefer to be invoiced at checkout, right? They'd prefer to be given a credit line, right? And all of these awesome features. Obviously, that takes time for us to build and to offer financing options for our customers. But one of the early plays that we did, just because doctors inherently have really low bad debt ratios, like under 1%. And so we said, why don't we just offer PO and invoicing, sort of Frankenstein at checkout, where they can just click that as an option and it automates an email that sends to them with an invoice. And then, they have to pick up the phone, verify it, call it, and then they get it on 30, 60, 90 terms. And so offering that, we saw a dramatic spike in the ATV after we stopped only forcing people down the credit card path. Now we're doing cool things with some fintech partners, just all the BNPL plays that are out there to see, what's going to work. And then what we really want to do is offer financing to each one of our customers to say, hey, just buy your supplies with Bttn at $25K a year. We'll give you at 0% financing. And you buy more stuff from us. You don't have to shell out that cash immediately. It's a win-win. And so as we get deeper into product, it becomes pretty specifically focused on the fintech aspect.
Yeah, certainly sounds like a great customer base to offer some, and embedded financing. So
Yeah, definitely.
yeah. So as far as beyond the kind of the purchase, right? So maybe when it comes to some of the I would say like distribution aspects and kind of fulfillment of that, do you see that as an opportunity, maybe that you're already kind of venturing into, or?
Yeah, it's a huge opportunity, and it's also something that we struggled with a lot when we started because my co-founder and I, we didn't come from healthcare distribution, right? We both came from big tech. We both came from an unmanaged marketplace, right, at our first startup, and we didn't understand the expectations that doctors had. We said, oh no, if it's 7-day delivery versus 2-day delivery, it's fine, right? They can pay for that at checkout if they want to, have expedited shipping. And it wasn't fine. Like, it was preventing our demand from actually making the flywheel go. And we hired a former McKesson executive, Steve Nielsen. He used to be the CEO of McKesson Medical, to join our organization as president back in February. And Steve is just a titan of healthcare distribution. Like any of the cool companies ever, Steve has been the CEO of or on the board of. And, he was retired, and we got connected with him just through channels. And he said, the only thing that would make me come out of retirement is something that makes me fundamentally challenge everything I know is true. And he's like, I think Bttn might be that exact thing. And so Steve opened up our eyes dramatically to what the customer expects out of us, in terms of how do they expect delivery to be handled, where should it be shipped to, simple things like when do they get called when the supplier drops it off at the hospital's front door, right? It doesn't go to the same set of packages that Amazon goes to or all these other distributors go to. What's the process like for fill rate and distribution? Who do we need to be talking to? Because you need to access this contract versus that contract, and just gave us the lay of the land. And so we in short order, that was back in probably February, we've ramped dramatically and created a whole new organization with inside Bttn called Service Excellence that's just wholly focused on the level of distribution quality that we have. Because what we realized is the road is limitless as long as we can match what the current suppliers are doing. And technology makes it so we don't only have to match them, we can exceed it, right? We can have customer service that's baked in at checkout, right? We can have customer service in the form of, you don't have to call your sales rep to ask where your order is. You can just log on and see, in your tracking portal, you can see your previous shipments, you can request an invoice, you can request billing history, all of these awesome things that basic e-commerce technology allows for, that they've never had in this industry. And so as we start to think about the future of distribution, it's not only from the aspect of how can we improve the current qualities, but then you think about the classic, Amazon transition, right? From drop shipping to warehousing, and, these amazingly built warehouses that are highly automated. That also doesn't exist in healthcare distribution, right? So there's a huge play for us thinking about distribution and logistics capabilities from the pick, pack, and ship level when we look, maybe a few years into the future. For now, our distributors that handle, Bttn's ordering and processing are phenomenal, and we don't have to carry any inventory expense, right? And we don't have to build warehouses and put up with that. So we're totally comfortable with the scale that we're having, but I think in the future, it's something that we'll be forced to look at and say, is there a better way to do this to offer our customers a better experience?
That's super interesting. It sounds like so many opportunities here. You're getting me pretty excited about it. So.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. So on the note of the team, what's your team like today?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, we have 80 folks currently on the team, and the way that we divided it out is we have a sales team that is mostly consists of inside sales. And then we have a strategic sales arm that's more high-level accounts, recurring customers that need a bit more coordination and organization. And we also have like a field sales rep And these are folks that have come from industry, from other competitors that sort of see the light and want to be a part of, this side of the aisle. And so that's our sales organization. That's probably 40% of our entire workforce. And then we have a digital marketing team, which is consistent of everything from e-commerce and SEO to brand and PR and SKU upload and all of these other categories. And then on the opposite side, we have our service excellence team that's operations and logistics and supply chain. And then we have our technology teams who are mostly just marketplace engineers. We don't have, very deep or extremely technical aspects, but there's a huge management aspect to our marketplace. And, we had to build our own PIM, and we have to integrate with the suppliers that we're working with all the time and manage the orders more closely. And then we have a people organization. And so that's the lay of the land, but from the high level, we have 4 senior leaders that I have no idea how we got so lucky, but we've assembled quite the team in a short amount of time. It's like I mentioned, Steve Nielsen is the former McKesson Medical CEO and Labsco CEO, and he's our president. Rich Garwood, same last name. He is our COO. He was president of Verizon Wireless as well as SVP at T-Mobile. So I just spent like 40 years in the industry building sales and marketing organizations. And then Chris Casala, she leads our product and engineering teams. Chris came from House Call Pro, another really cool startup based in San Diego. And so she was leading product and engineering and customer success and a million things as they went on their great growth journey. And so she's been building SMB tech for the last 20 years, and she brings that all to Bttn. And then Angela Wren, who was a VP of, I think, HR. I don't think they call it people there at T-Mobile and many other organizations. And so with those 4, that assembles our SLT, and my co-founder, Jack, heads up our product organization.
Sounds like you have a pretty amazing team. And it's probably a little bit more operationally complex marketplace, I'm assuming.
Yeah, definitely. Just because of the expectations that our customers have, and the managed aspect means that we have to take on that burden, but it leads to more supply and more demand for us.
Yeah. So I know we mentioned that right before we started recording, though, about your recent raise. So what's the fundraising journey been like for you?
Yeah, the fundraising journey has been really interesting because my first company I started, I had completely bootstrapped, and so I'd come from that side of thinking. And when Jack and I started Bttn, we didn't want to just bootstrap it. We knew that we wanted to for a period, but we also knew that this idea could be big enough that we wanted to test and see. So we had both taken some of the proceeds from our exit and started Bttn, and just basically gave ourselves 6 months of runway and said, all right, well, this is going to be an expensive experiment, but we got nothing better to do, and we think this is a good idea. And then sales climbed immediately. We were profitable since day one. And we just said, all right, well, there's something here. We've extended our runway from 6 months to, I think it was like 13 months. Do we want to keep going, or do we want to fundraise? And at that point, we had been surrounding ourselves with as many mentors and industry folks as possible. And they all said, this is the ripe opportunity to pour gas on the fire. So we had said, okay, we might only fundraise once. We had still that mindset of bootstrap. So we raised $1.5 million, and primarily from angels, and then opened it up to friends and family. And so Amal Deshpande, who's the CEO and co-founder of Farmers Business Network, who I mentioned, I just cold emailed them. And he's a former Kleiner Perkins guy, and he's a very active angel, and runs a small fund now just from his personal investments. And I just said, hey, I really admire your business model. I think it's very similar to Bttn. I'd love to chat. He said, no problem, get on the phone. So he led our seed round, our pre-seed round, and that million and a half, we were lucky enough, just like Crunchbase randomly picked it up and wrote an article on it. And with that, that was in June of 21. Pretty much immediately, my inbox flooded with seed stage VCs, and we were, not really taking it seriously. I was taking maybe one in every 10 meetings just to be nice. Hadn't dealt with this side of the world before, didn't really know what I was doing. And there was a really persistent group here in Seattle called Fuse. And I loved one of their investors. His name was Brendan Wales. And he just got it. He just understood what we were trying to do. He had been in marketplaces his whole career, some really cool marketplaces like Chewy. And we just hit it off. And I realized it wasn't about taking money or not taking money. It was about, I wanted to surround myself and our teams with these types of people. And so their fund, since it's Seattle based, is all Amazon executives, right? It's all Microsoft executives. It's like people that, I'm familiar with from my background. But the Amazon aspect, I was like, man, this is kind of too hard to pass. The marketplace expertise just built in. And so they ended up leading our seed round, and that closed in August of 21. So it's pretty much right after our pre-seed round. And so that was our first price round. So we raised 5 at a 20 pre. So in like 6 months, we had gotten to like 26 and a half post, and just started to rapidly expand the team, rapidly deploy capital, just go for it. And we were lucky, just the way that the cards pulled out. The Crunchbase writer left Crunchbase the day our article was released and started at TechCrunch the next day. And so I saw that and I was like, hey, could you write our seed funding as well? And she goes, oh yeah, sure. We'd love to. And so she covered our, Christine Hall, she covered our seed round as well. And so we just got lucky. Like, it was just a few things of this. And then after we announced the seed, and we were having just dramatic product market fit. And that was back during the, wild west of 2021 fundraising. And so we were getting reached out to pretty consistently, but I had drawn the line that I didn't think that we were going to raise anytime soon. And our sales spiked, and we were growing really fast. And so the board all got together and said, it could be time for a good fundraise. And this was right after Christmas. So as you know, in end of January, the market said pause. And that's the moment we decided to fundraise, and didn't know. And so I went back to all the connections, in February and in end of February, early March. And it was a totally different conversation, right? They didn't care about our growth. They cared about our efficiencies. They thought it was cool how fast we had gone in such short amount of time, but the questions around the business, had grown astronomically. But we had always such a high level of interest in Bttn that I think that that's what really saved us, because our business model can always be profitable. Like, we can always move the levers back and say, hey, we're good. But there's so much market to capture that every time we fundraised in the past, it's just been to pour gas. And I know founders say that, but like, we really mean it, that every single time we've raised, it's been about, hey, we don't have to, but we have plenty of money and this can sustain itself. But what we're really interested in is capitalizing on these 5 opportunities. And so the fundraising environment sort of has stayed that way for us. And, Tiger ended up coming through on our A. There was a few other groups that, I really loved, but, the team at Tigers is sharp, and they got the market cold. They have an excellent B2B marketplace team, super impressed by everything that they've been able to provide in the form of advice, as well as, connections and capital infusement. And they're really on the ball. And so, yeah, I think at this point, we're looking at our Series B, not sure of the timing. One of those, again, scenarios where we have a lot of things we want to do, but the market wants to take a cooler right now. But the one thing that I will say is, when I get asked this question is there's still so much available capital in the market, right? There's still so many funds that just announced like their new biggest fund that closed at the end of 21 or maybe the early stages of 22. And so I think the interest is still there, but founders just need to be very aware that it's not the same. You're not going to get the 5x markup round to round that you could have expected in 21 or the years prior. And that's okay, right? It's not always, if what you're after is that markup, you're probably not in the right mindset about fundraising to begin with. And so just with those expectations aligned, I think that in the future, we'll see, but we're excited about what's to come.
You have to keep the Everything Marketplaces Syndicate top of mind. So shameless plug.
I love that. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a cool story about the initial kind of press. I think that's actually how I came across you after your initial kind of seed announcement. So back in
I love that.
So
yeah.
Cool. So we're gonna get to some questions here because we have a few. Hey Eric, do you want to come on?
Hey, thanks for that. Hey JT, how's it going?
How's it going, Eric?
Cool. So I guess like two quick questions for you. I guess like the big thing I'm curious about is like I think I read elsewhere, maybe in one of the articles, you kind of talking about like the marketplace being supply constrained. So just like kind of curious, like what's kind of like the network of like distributors that you guys are working with right now, or kind of like how do you start to really like up your capacity on the supply front? And then I guess related to that is like at what point do the McKessons and the big guys of the world like start to really pay attention, and like or have you started to see any behavior where they kind of come to like start to come in and be like I'm just going to crush you on price, right? Like this small doctor's practice is still valuable to me because of all the things you were talking about before with the minimum order quantities and such, and like screw button, we're just going to come after you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Two really good questions. The first one is absolutely true. We are completely supply constrained. Like I mentioned, we have 2.5 million SKUs, but we only have 15 million live on the platform, 15,000 live on the platform. And so what we found is that and we should have realized this earlier, but basically the moment that we started dumping SKUs on the platform, optimizing landing pages, just getting everything up there, demand, sales, XYZ, it all just climbed thereafter. So we have an interesting sort of supply constraint where it's not that we don't have the access. We actually have great supply access. Our distributors, it's only expanding, right? We can go direct to manufacturer now because we have enough demand. So it's less so the aspect of getting the SKUs. It's just that none of those folks that we're sourcing the SKUs from are tech enabled, right? So they don't have images that are ready to go for us. So we have to go crawl the internet and find, non-copyrighted images for these products for us to upload. We have to index them. We have to go through that heavy lift. And so our supply constraint is completely tied to how many SKUs can we get live on the platform as soon as possible, and not so much that, our distributors aren't willing to. I think if you think about that in terms of the environment, so basically how every distributor works today is that they source from, hundreds of different manufacturers. They take inventory based on the segments that they serve. So let's take Henry Schein, for example. They have a huge dentist presence, right? And so most of their inventories are based on dental manufacturers, right? And so they typically don't compete with the McKessons and the Medlines and the other folks. They compete with more regional distributors. But since their inventories are backed into that, they focus on dentists. They have to stay to dentists. McKesson, very heavy in alternate site providers, and pretty much like anything that's a physician office. Owens and Minor, very good with hospitals, right? And huge tonnage amounts. And so, but what Bttn gets to do is we get to sit a layer on top of that and go, we don't need to pick which ones because we don't have to back our inventories in like that. And manufacturers love that. Manufacturers love to see that, oh, this is a channel that we aren't accessing through our current customers. Great. We'll sell to you the same way that we sell to a McKesson or the same way that we sell to a Henry Schein, because we see this as market share, right? If you're capturing market share that we don't have and we can sell more products through yours, why not? So our supply constraint isn't the willingness of more distributors to join. It's just the manual process of getting those SKUs up and ready. And then the second part, yes, they're definitely taking notice. And it's interesting because, we've done a pretty mixed bag of flying under the radar plus intentionally poking the bear. And it's all strategic in the sense of, we need to get our name out there because dentists care a lot about name brand recognition and they care about the communities and circles that you're in. But the truth is that there's not really a price lowering mechanism, as you said, that they could do to force Bttn out of the market. The business model that they have to support doesn't allow for that, right? The quarterly reports to Wall Street don't support that model. And additionally, the easiest way to do this is for them to build it themselves, right? For them to go, well, why don't we just also have an e-commerce experience? The way that 95 or 99% of their revenues flow are through these field reps, right? Or through these sales reps that are in the field that then act as, their own little entrepreneurs. And then all of that business funnels through them and they set the price and they go for it. So in order to match what Bttn's doing in terms of a price competitive standpoint, they have to fire all of those people or lay them off, and then they'd have to build an e-commerce platform. I don't know if I was sitting in a boardroom, if I would align with that decision, right? Because it's like Frank Slootman, right? You have to burn the ships in order to potentially set up a new business model, that works for them. It's 7 powers, counter positioning. It's these things that they just fundamentally would have to bet so hard on an area that they have no expertise in and no area, and also believe that Bttn is the future, which they can't because it's a lot of innovators' dilemma, which means that we just have this situation on our hands that, quite frankly, they will probably never build something to match what we have. And if they do, it will be an afterthought, right? Like some of them have an e-commerce website, but you have to have an account and you have to sign up for it. And something like 1% of sales ends up going to the platform because it's just an afterthought. It's not the priority, right? It's not the thing that they focus night and day on building because they're not a tech company. And so from the price standpoint, because of the way the distribution works, they can't price us out. We go to the same manufacturers as them, right? We're buying from the same people, and those folks care more about market share than they do about making one of their customers happy. And so we have a great opportunity, I think, to not only, meet the challenge, but then the other side of it is we would love those people to be our partners. If we could use their distribution and fulfillment capabilities at our pricing levels, that would be the perfect scenario. So what we more often find is that it's not a competitive conversation. They see us as a potential partner, right? Because they're not going to do e-commerce. They don't really care about doing e-commerce, but they know that Bttn will be able to do it better than they will and potentially capture more market share.
So interesting. Those are 2 really great questions. And thanks for sharing with us more on that, JT. I actually wanted to ask that, brought up a kind of a question that I actually had for you, which is to go back to the supply side. So as far as on the SKUs, are you showing who the distributor is to the doctors? And then also too, are you potentially price setting or?
Yeah, so we are price setting, but we're not showing the quote unquote, like who's the distributor. People think that Bttn is Bttn manages the entire process, payment, fulfillment, delivery, refunds, returns. It all flows through us. And so as a part of that, one thing that doesn't exist, and the reason why the marketplace model also, to Eric's question, doesn't work for these competitors, is none of the prices are transparent today. Right. And that's like a core tenet of Bttn is, so if you wanted to go search the price of a SKU that, you should be paying as a dentist, there's no way to go price compare that on the internet. And so what we thrive on is putting our very basic price setting structure in place that is 20 to 40% less expensive. And we love when doctors go to our website and they go, "What? Are you serious? How? I've been paying $60 for that same exact product for the past 10 years and I had no idea." And we're like, "Well, sorry, you should have that's going to be a tough conversation with your sales rep, right? Or you could just switch to buying from us. And that sort of jaw-dropping moment is a lot of the reason I think why the marketplace model works in this situation, because folks want to know they're getting the best price on the products that they're buying every day.
Yeah, certainly sounds like it. That was exactly why I was asking too. So
yeah.
Hey, Patty, do you want to come on?
Yeah, that'd be great. Hi, JT. Thanks so much for this session. This has been incredible. So I'm trying to do what you're doing for the pharma space. I'd love to chat with you as I'm sure there's a lot of interesting things. And I come from the procurement side on the pharmacy space. And so what's interesting is, all the things that you mentioned at the beginning, that it's like customers want to hear different things and different values than, the investors and everything else. It's a totally different story. I'd love to understand many things, but one of the things you mentioned, there's a slug between the 57 devices that you had available to 2.5. Can you expand a little bit more about your early go-to-market strategy and kind of how you thought through as you were going towards product market fit?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. Pharma is a great space to focus on. So congratulations on that. The initial go-to-market for us, was demand-based. So we were sort of identifying what were the top in-demand SKUs in the market, mixed with what were suppliers willing to sell us. A lot of it was just what suppliers were willing to sell us. And so we had to go to market with just those, 50-ish SKUs, and we didn't have a choice about it. But the ways that we really got creative about getting in front of customers were direct sales, like pick up the phone, get in front of someone, don't care about your margin, just get numbers on the board. That was the first priority. Second priority was, we had to get word of mouth going because of the way that, this industry operates. And so we had actually partnered with different healthcare associations across the country. And so initially we would reach out to, like, for example, the Hospital Association of Southern California. And we'd say, hey, HASC, we'd love to be your partner. Can you endorse us? And we'll, give all of your members a 15% discount on their medical supplies if they buy through Bttn. And then they'd give us the email lists and the phone number lists of their members, and they'd put out a mass messaging. But what they also did is they used to put our branding on their website. And so it'd say like official distribution partners of Hospital Association of Southern California. And it would be a picture of Bttn and our old crappy logo next to like the McKesson logo. And we'd screenshot it, and like send it out to a bunch of people and be like, look, we're the same as McKesson. And so just getting that natural trust in the brand, we put a really high priority in terms of our go-to-market. Those channels were overall not very efficient, but it turns out that the branding mechanism that put in place, we used to do a press release every time we got a new association to join Bttn. We got up to like, 27 different associations across the US that are now partnered with Bttn as their official medical supply partner. And once we had enough demand, right, we had enough customers coming to us, we were then able to go back to the same suppliers and say, hey, look, we have people that are willing to buy more from us. Can you please give us more to buy? And some said no. Some said, you're starting to compete with me, or, I don't want to lose business, or the inventory is expensive. You're not paying for any of it. They're going to have a million reasons. But what we did was we just kept expanding, right? And we put a, supplier sign up page on our website, and folks would just email this suppliers at Bttn, and we'd vet them and we'd do a few test orders. And then we started to slowly add more and more of these regional distributors to our catalog. And that was great because it gave us access to more products. But what we really didn't realize was, the local and regional distributors, they were never going to be like what was propelling Bttn up into the level of service quality that we were looking for. We had to get to the point that a nationwide distributor was willing to work with us, and be our fulfillment partner. And that only happened when we hired an industry expert, which was Steve, right? Steve was able to open the door for us to say, hey, we really need someone that has broad line SKU access that can get every practice, everything that they need, instead of just these onesie twosies, regional distributors. And so we always had the demand, and we still are like that. Like, our product market fit is kind of so dramatic that it puts a ton of pressure on our supply side to get more SKUs up, more accessibility. We have customers that want to buy more from us, but we just can't, because we don't have the distributor that can fulfill it, or the manufacturer that can. And so our go-to-market, besides, our field sales on the demand side and our digital marketing efforts, our main growth lever is SKUs. Our main growth lever is distribution quality. And as a supply constrained marketplace, that will probably continue to be the focus. One of our growth advisors was early at Instacart, and he talks about first 3 years of Instacart, like 75% of all growth was from SKUs, right? And so I think we realized that a little bit late, which is unfortunate, because we could have been doing this a year ago. But now we're just hammering hard at it.
Thank you.
Yeah. That was really a great question. And thanks for jumping on and asking, Patty. So that was one I meant to ask in the beginning. So, well, cool. So we are almost out of time here, but this is a really interesting chat. And thanks for taking the time to join us here, JT. And this is really cool to hear about your journey building and scaling Bttn to where it's at today. And huge congrats. One last question that I actually had for you, and that's if you were to go back to right before you started Bttn, what would you tell yourself about marketplaces?
No matter what industry that you're in, people before you have done this. And I think part of me didn't, because we had so much healthcare aspect and so much healthcare distribution aspect to our marketplace, was that I didn't fully buy into that marketplace dynamics would take place within Bttn. And so we didn't make investments in SEO, in digital marketing, in SKU optimization soon enough, and relied fairly heavily on demand focus without kind of doing that natural assessment of if we were supplier demand constrained. And I think that if I knew that sooner, we would have made some different decisions. And the reason we didn't was because I was so in my head about the specificity of healthcare distribution. So I'd go back and tell myself that, and definitely encourage myself to just keep going.
Yeah, that's so relatable. So it's a great way to wrap things up. And last but not least, time for a quick plug. Where can we keep up with you at?
Yeah, absolutely. Personally, I'm active on Twitter, if you want terrible sarcasm, at JT Garwood. I am on LinkedIn, on Instagram, same handles, JT Garwood. And our website's www.bttnusa.com. And Bttn's also pretty active across all of social channels, especially LinkedIn. So please give us a follow, and would love to hear from you.
Awesome. I'll make sure I put it all the links in the description of this. So cool. Well,
Fantastic.
Thanks again for joining us here. This is really fun and exciting to learn a little bit more about what you're building with Bttn. So
yeah, it's been great. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks everyone for the great questions.